점수 잡는 hackers.
Start with the introductory sentence. Now the passage is what? Landscapes from the waves, marine terraces of California. And this is what? This is a U.S. Geological Survey, meaning this is a U.S. Geological research paper. So you know what to expect. What are you expecting? Well, we're going to talk about marine terraces of California, and probably, since it is a geological survey, how or why it is formed according to these researchers. Now let's look at the questions and see how well you have to understand the passage. The main purpose of the passage, though this one you can use the blurb, and then some other hints. A. According to the passage, in order for a marine terrace to form, uplift must do what? And it's an evidence-based question. Meaning what? You have to read the 4 answer choices and figure out which one talks about uplifts and the keywords pertaining to the question. Another detailed question follows, and it is also an evidence-based question, meaning what? That you don't have to locate it yourself. They are right here. All you have to do is pick from the 4 lines. The next question, based on the passage, it can be reasonably inferred that on the highest level of the stair-step series of a marine terrace, soil will be, and then you have your answer choices. Now this one is definitely a detailed question, which means what? Yes, which means you have to pinpoint a single line to solve this question. So what are you going to do? While you're skimming through your passage, you're going to look for parts or mark parts that contain the word soil and come back to it later to narrow down your search. Now the next 3 questions are actually data questions. Now, data in the graph indicates that the sea level experienced the most significant decline during which period? The second graph question, which choice is supported by the data in the graph? Both of these are what? Only about the figure. So no need to read the passage here. Now the last one is based on the graph and the passage. Again, what are we going to do? Just like we did in our paired passage and the both question, what we're going to do here is we are also going to treat this question separately. Deal with the part that has to do with the graph first, identify it, eliminate any answer choices that you can, and then after reading the passage, come back to the answer choices and narrow them down. Understand? So we're going to start with the graph here. Again, always read the blurb pertaining to the graph. Now, the graph below shows how the global sea level has changed over the past 450,000 years relative to the current sea level. So we have a standard here. So if you take a look at the graph, you see what? You see that this is the current sea level. We have the relative level here as well as the dates down here. Now here the trick was what? The trick was reading this part of the graph. I'll show you while we are solving the question. So number 50, the data in the graph indicate that the sea level experienced the most significant decline. So we want to see where the sea level declines most among these time periods. Now here, if you take a look, let's go back to the graph here. Now, declining would mean the sea level dropped. Now, normally we would assume that going from here to here would be a drop, right? The trick was where? The trick was looking at the years before present. So it's before present, which means what? Time travels this way and not the other way around. So in this graph, what would that mean? Well, it would mean that since we're traveling this way, this would be the decline and not reading the graph that way. If you didn't make that mistake, then this question should have been fairly easy. If not, you would have gotten this answer choice incorrect because they do have an answer choice that made sure that you predicted in that incorrect manner. So based on this, which drop is the most significant? Well, we can see that the most significant drop starts from here to here, and that year would be B. And if you read the graph wrong, of course, you would have gone with A. Now, if you did and you got this answer choice wrong, make sure you mark it and tell yourself constantly to check the labels so you do not make such careless mistakes again. Number 51, which choice is supported by the data in the graph? Now, this case, you want to compare your answer choices one by one with the graph very carefully, okay? Do not make mistakes on the graph questions. Now, A, sea level has never been higher than it is today. Now, today, the sea level is over here. Now, if you take a look, we see right over here, which is what? It is actually higher than the current level. So we know A is incorrect. So you move on. B, the sea level has not exceeded its current level in over 100,000 years. Again, the current level was exceeded at this point here. 100,000 years would be over there, which means B is actually correct. Now, what about C? The sea level reaches its lowest point, which would be over here, around 450,000 years ago. No, it was not around 450,000 years ago. So C would be incorrect. D, the sea level has been the least predictable in the last 25,000 years. Now, what is the problem with this answer choice? Now, if you take a look at the Y, it says relative sea level. The x-axis talks about years before present. Nowhere in the graph does it talk about predictability. So D is something that you cannot get from the graph alone. So D is actually irrelevant to this graph.